Welcome to the Grading Guidelines Professional Development for SWHS High School for the 2017 and 2018 school year. The purpose of this professional development is to give you some insight into the grading policies and procedures that we do here at SWHS High School. If you're new here and you have questions beyond what this professional development provides, then be sure you get with either your mentor or department chair. I'm Candace Ayala, and you're always welcome to ask me questions as well. The Spring Branch ISD grading guidelines can be found on the website. It is linked here in the PowerPoint presentation as well. It gives you detailed explanation behind grading practices in Spring Branch. In Spring Branch, we record numerical grades in our Skyward Gradebook program. Skyward allows families to access students' grades, attendance. They're able to communicate with you via Skyward. And so we encourage you to input all grades in a timely manner into the Skyward system. As you can see highlighted here, teachers have 5 school days except for major projects for assignments to be input into the Skyward grading system. Numerical grades are assigned in Skyward, and their letter equivalent, which you can see in this chart, is about a 9 to 10 point range. And that letter equivalent is what we use to scale for GPA calculation and for ranking. In Spring Branch, you are allowed to input incomplete grades. Remember that incomplete grades need to be finalized within 2 weeks of the grading period, and they really are for extenuating circumstances. So if you have questions about what an extenuating circumstance might be, please come talk to either one of the assistant principals or your department chair. We don't want to just put in incomplete grades frivolously because they impact things like UIL eligibility. They eventually will revert to a 0. And so if you don't remember that you put an incomplete in the grade book, which is indicated by putting an I, then within 2 weeks of the grading period, that will be converted into a 0 unless you have communicated a special need for a student. Grades are used to calculate GPA, and so here is exactly how GPA is calculated. Make sure that you understand that we are on a weighted 6.0 system, and so as you can see in this chart over here, if a student receives an A in a course, depending on the weight of the course, which means if the course is a GT, dual credit, pre-AP, or AP course, then that course might be eligible for an additional grade point. So the way we determine if they are going to get the additional bump in their GPA is that they are eligible for one course in each of the 4 core curricular areas. So they can get a weighted GPA point in English Language Arts, Math, Science, and Social Studies. They can get it for one course. So if they take 2 AP courses in the same year, only one of those courses will receive a weighted GPA point. AP Spanish, AP Art, AP French, AP Art History, those courses do not qualify for the AP or for the GPA course bump. So this is how GPA is calculated currently. A student who receives a 90 to a 100 would receive a 7 point in a course that they have a weight for. If it's a grade level course, they would receive 6 points. If it is a modified course, they would receive 5 points. And if it is a basic or functional level course, they would receive 4 points. This brings us to the calculation of the 9-week grades. This is very important that you are up to date on grades so that you're not having to input grades frivolously and fast and furiously at the end of the 9 weeks. Remember that major grades like exams, quizzes, in-class assignments should only constitute, you should have at least 10 of these grades recorded in each 9-week grading period. Homework is not allowed to constitute more than 20% of a student's average, and no single assignment, test, or project may count more than 25% of a 9-week average. Please remember these formulas when you are setting up your categories. If you set up too many categories, then you will find it's very difficult to have enough grades to follow these guidelines. If you have a homework category, an in-class assignment category, an out-of-class assignment category, major exams, quizzes, all of those categories have to have enough assignments in them so that no single assignment counts as 25% or more of a student's grade. As a team, you need to set up categories together. Our expectation is that teams have these same categories with these same calculations set up together, and that you are communicating in your PLCs about how and what you are putting into each of those categories. It is also important to talk about that this year we will not be using the multiplier in Skyward. Every team needs to have categories set up, and they need to be using a multiplier of 1 for each assignment. The purpose of grades are to communicate with kids and parents, students' progress, and the use of the multiplier last year created problems with that communication process. And so as a campus, we will not be using the multiplier this year. When calculating 9 weeks grades, remember that a student's average should include at least 2 major grades, especially in the first 9 weeks when there is a lot of activity cram-packed into a very short 9 weeks. Make sure that you spread major grades out so that you do not have to do 2 major grades in the 7th and 8th or 8th and 9th week of the 9-week grading period. Like I said, content teams will have the same grading categories and scales, and the multiplier is no longer permitted. Remember that the semester grade in high school, the semester grade allows for 20% of the final grade to go towards the final examination. So as you are preparing and planning throughout the semester, keep in mind that the content that you are testing in the final examination will count as 20% of the final grade. And this last bullet just talks about making sure that you don't cut off grades too early in the grading period, and that you don't push things so late in the grading period that students do not have the opportunity to utilize the retest and retaking policy. When you're thinking about grades and our limited English proficient students, remember that our grading guidelines allows for you to be more flexible in grading achievement, especially for newcomers. And so you're responsible for making sure, one, that you're using accommodations to help students who are not totally dependent on the English language and who are acquiring a new language, and that you are not instantly penalizing students for not having a good command of the English language. Remember that you should be modifying instruction, pacing, and materials to make sure that you are able to give students an opportunity to demonstrate mastery and to continue to acquire the English language. So when necessary, tests and final exams need to be modified to accommodate students' proficiency levels in English. And we will be talking about how to modify for both LEP and special ed students extensively throughout this school year. But if you have questions, make sure that you're talking as a team on what those modifications look like. Make sure that you're talking as a department, and then make sure you're utilizing your assistant principals and specialists to help ensure that tests are not just set up to penalize, and that students are not immediately failing courses because of their inability to understand English immediately upon coming to Springwoods High School. In addition, you need to be very aware of how you are grading special education students. We have a system in place for setting up individualized educational programs for students in the special education program. Make sure that you're reading those IEPs and that you understand what accommodations or modifications should be implemented to give special education students the opportunity to be successful in your classroom. As part of this process, we have an annual admission review and dismissal committee meeting, and they determine if the accommodations and or modifications are appropriate for each individual student. This is also your chance to communicate with the ARD committee about concerns you might have, encouraging students to have additional accommodations, especially in the testing environment, and to express any concerns that you might have moving forward. And so for our special education students, it should not be a surprise to the special education ARD facilitators or tracking teachers if a student is not being successful in your class. Make sure that you are also communicating with special education students' parents about students who are not making progress or who are struggling to complete assignments or who are having behavioral issues in your class, as the ARD needs to make appropriate changes when students are not being successful in the educational environment. At the bottom of this slide, you'll notice I put Carrie Palmy's contact information. If you have a struggling student in one of your classes that is in the special education programming, she is a great contact to email. That is who you should be contacting to make sure that all modifications and accommodations are appropriate for each individual student. We're now going to talk about homework for a minute. Make sure that the homework that you assign is high quality and that it is something that a student is practicing, that you have provided all of the tools for them to be able to be successful on homework assignments. These are the guiding principles in the grading guidelines around homework. So make sure that you understand that homework should not be assigned as discipline consequences, that there are certain times during the year when homework is not allowed to be assigned, during holidays especially, and that homework is not excessive in your class, and especially when you're thinking about the amount of homework you assign and you multiply that by 6 or 7 classes. Make sure that the amount of homework that students are taking home is manageable. A couple of reminders about UIL and grading, which is very important, especially in the first 9 weeks. The UIL first grading period actually comes up in the 6 weeks, and so you need to make sure your 6-week grades are as accurate as possible. Remember that UIL programs keep students connected, and so we want kids participating in those programs. We want them to be connected to Springwoods High School. And with that connection comes coaches and directors and mentors that can help students get back on track. So make sure that you're communicating with sponsors and coaches and parents and students when they are not progressing in your class. We don't want a kid to be ineligible for UIL and it be a surprise to all the people who are trying to keep that student connected. Students during UIL periods where it is a eligibility loss period, if they are not passing classes, then they are not allowed to participate. With that being said, you guys often ask me, there are exempt courses that do not make a student ineligible. Most of those courses are pre-AP and AP courses, although there are some grade level courses as well that are exempt from the no pass, no play policies. Like I said, the first 6-week grading period is tricky, so make sure that you're really on your grade book during that first 6-week period. Incomplete grades make a student ineligible to play. So if you put in an I in the grade book in any course, then that student is no longer eligible to participate in UIL until that incomplete is taken care of. So when the grading period is up and grades are in, I often get questions about grade changes. You can change a grade pretty much at any point that you want to, as long as you're communicating with me about those grade changes. If you change a student's grade, it does not automatically make them eligible for UIL participation. Once the grading period closes, the only reason a student who is deemed ineligible at the time that the grading period closed to become eligible is if you made an error in your grade book or the student retested a major assignment. So when you input a grade change in Skyward, unless you put I made an error or the student completed a retest, you can do the grade change, but it will not change the student's eligibility to participate in UIL programming. So, oftentimes you guys put in Skyward, you're inputting a grade change because the student completed makeup work. That's great. We're glad the student did the makeup work. However, it will not change their UIL status until the UIL eligibility period opens again and it is a gained period. So the grade changes will go into effect, but it will not change the student's eligibility unless the teacher made a grading error or the student retested a major grade or assignment. If you have questions about UIL eligibility, please do not hesitate to come and see me, and we can talk about kind of the nuances around UIL eligibility. We also typically have a lot of questions around grades and DAEP. So when students are placed at our alternative school, they are removed from Skyward for the core courses. We know that there are English, math, science, and social studies teachers at DAEP, and those students are moved to their rosters, unless they are enrolled in a pre-AP or AP courses. They do not have pre-AP and AP courses at DAEP. So if you are a pre-AP, AP, or an elective teacher, you need to send work to DAEP for the student to complete. The way to do that is to drop off the work with Mr. Dixon or Mr. Day. They will scan the work in and put it in a special drop box for DAEP. As the work is completed, it will be returned back to them and they will forward it to you. If you have any questions about this process, you can talk to me, you can talk to Mr. Dixon, or you can talk to Mr. Day about how to get work to and from DAEP. That concludes the introduction to grading at Springwoods High School Professional Development. So to receive credit for this course, you need to go into the PowerPoint and click on this hyperlink. It'll take you to some questions. Once you've completed those questions, then you will get credit for this professional development, and you will have completed the grading guidelines professional development for Springwoods High School this year. Thank you, and I am so excited to get started on a new school year with all of you.